Did you know there's been very little study on rats in Canada? Yeah, I didn't know that either. And for most of us, the next sort of statement is, so what? But apparently this is quite important to see how rats behave, what diseases they carry, and how they might impact the people who could come in contact with them or any of their droppings or debris. There is something called the Rat Project underway in Vancouver's downtown east side right now. It's a project that's been instigated and being worked on by a young woman by the name of Dr. Chelsea Himsworth. And there's a whole YouTube video about the Rat Project. So we're going to show you that, but I just want to put out a warning. There are real rats running around in cages in this video. So if rats make you squeamish, don't turn us off. Keep listening, but maybe turn away so you don't have to see them. So ladies and gentlemen, may I present the Rat Project.
Dr. Chelsea Himsworth, the lead researcher for the Vancouver Rat Project. Although rats are an important source of disease for people living in cities around the world, we know remarkably little about them, particularly here in Canada. By trapping and sampling rats collected throughout Vancouver's downtown east side, we hope to determine what infectious agents rats carry and how these agents circulate in rat populations. This information will help us to gauge the health risks posed by urban rats and develop strategies to monitor and mitigate those risks. One of the disease agents we looked for is called Leptospira. It's a spiral-shaped bacterium that is carried in the rat kidney and shed in the urine. Although Leptospira is harmless in rats, infection in people can lead to fever, kidney failure, and even hemorrhage into the lungs. We found that many rats in the downtown east side were infected with Leptospira, but that the rate of infection varied remarkably, between 0 and 66% among the different city blocks. Urban rats live in tight colonies, with small home territories often less than 50 meters in diameter. Colonies are effectively isolated from their neighbors by physical barriers like roads and by social pressures from adjacent rat colonies. This means that while one block may have a lot of Leptospira-carrying rats, the adjacent block might have none. We're still trying to figure out why some blocks have Leptospira-carrying rats and others don't. We also found that older rats, fatter rats, and rats with more bite wounds were more likely to carry disease. This is interesting because we used to think that rats became infected with Leptospira through random exposure in the environment. But age, body fat, and bite wounds are all factors associated with dominance and social hierarchies, suggesting that Leptospira is probably transmitted through social contact among rats. This has implications for our current methods of managing rat populations through trapping and poisoning. Studies in other colony-forming species have shown that killing a few individuals can destabilize the family unit, causing migration of infected animals to uninfected populations and increasing fighting behavior, both of which can facilitate disease spread. This means that traditional trapping and poisoning might actually increase the number of rats infected with Leptospira, and this is something that will need to be investigated in future studies.
And Dr. Chelsea Himsworth is joining us now via Skype to discuss more about this. You know, Dr. Himsworth, when I think of young people like you appearing in YouTube videos, it's not usually to be the star of the Rat Project. Have you had any comments from friends and family about that kind of thing?
Well, I agree. It's not a subject that many people like to talk about, but when you sort of start the conversation of how little we know about these animals that have lived among us for centuries, people start getting really interested.
Why rats? Why did you pick this project?
Well, it really stems back to this issue of the fact that we know so little about them, which is really surprising. We honestly know more about animals like grizzly bears or elephants than we do about rats, which most of us are far more likely to come into contact with. And that really piqued my interest.
Do you think that's because most of us sort of go, ooh, rats, I don't want to deal with them, so they aren't really kind of, you know, an animal that people, like a cuddly bunny?
I think for sure. They're definitely not as glamorous as some other research species like whales. But I also think it's because people sort of have a feeling that they already understand rats. There's a lot of urban mythology and assumptions, and I think we just don't realize that those really aren't backed up by science.
I know when I was watching the video, I was surprised at how small they are. They look to me like what I would have called mice.
Yes, they're definitely, I think, in our mind, maybe our social fears associated with rats lead us to believe they're a lot larger than they are. But yeah, they are quite small, and they come in all different sizes depending on the age of the species.
How big can a rat get?
Our largest rats, honestly, were only about 500 grams.
That's,
so that's
half a pound or
Yeah.
a pound. And what have you found so far?
Well, as I mentioned, we started out by looking for Leptospira, and that's what the video was about. And so the reason that we chose that is because Leptospira is a significant cause of disease for people living in other parts of the world. So between 2009 and 2011, there were actually 12 internationally reported outbreaks of rat-associated Leptospira in several different countries. And so we know that this is potentially a health threat to people, and we wanted to start there. So that's the work that we've done so far, and that was detailed in the video. But future work is going to cover a variety of different bacteria and viruses. We're also going to look for some antibiotic-resistant bacteria, like the superbug MRSA that can cause drug-resistant infections in people. And we're also going to use some pretty exciting new technologies to see if we can discover actually new viruses and bacteria that have never been discovered before.
How many people are working on this rat project?
Yeah, it's important to realize the Rat Project is a huge collaboration. So it's run out of UBC, and we have both physicians and veterinarians working on it, but we also collaborate with the BC CDC, the Public Health Agency of Canada, and a variety of governmental and academic institutions, both in Canada and around the world.
So you're really doing research that could eventually sort of change the way people deal with rat populations around the world.
That's what we're hoping. We're hoping that the work will actually provide some more effective tools for dealing with rat infestations and for both monitoring and mitigating the health risks that rats pose to people.
I just have to ask you this. What do you do in your spare time?
Well, so far I think a lot about rats. That's definitely it takes up most of my time. I'm also a veterinary pathologist, so when I'm not thinking about rats, I'm often thinking about other animal species.
All right, Dr. Chelsea Hemsworth, thanks for joining us this morning.
Thank you very much.
Very cool project, the Rat Project. You know, what I learned out of that video was that sometimes just killing rats and getting the ones, you know, in your immediate area out of the way isn't often the best solution. Just simply for what that video showed us is that they become more aggressive, they go migrate to other populations, and that creates all sorts of problems. So amazing what people do for their daily jobs.